Good afternoon, everyone. This is Truby Chiaviello. I'm the publisher and editor of PRIMO magazine, and I'm coming here to you today from Washington, D.C., the nation's capital. And today's date is March 10th. And since I've been publishing and editing PRIMO since 2004, I must say that this is the most active period for the Italian American community. And the reason for that, of course, is Christopher Columbus, Columbus Day, the movement by a number of people to change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. And to add to that, also a number of municipalities, cities, and elsewhere are removing statues of Columbus, monuments and other public squares and parks and other places. So the Italian American community has come together to try to fight this. And we've had some successes. We've also had some failures as well. It's been an ongoing battle. And this is an important battle for Italian Americans because Columbus really is a figurehead. That's really how best we can describe it. Columbus represents the founding of the United States, a Eurocentric posture. And there is a move by people who want to change our country, who want to not make it the way it has been, take away the customs and traditions, change our history. And to do that, Columbus is seen as the number one fall guy, the scapegoat, the figure of history that should be eradicated. And you see this happening all over the place. But the Italian American community has come together to try to fight it. So what I hope to do today and in the future is to bring you up to date as to what's happening and how we're involved in trying to retain our country with the traditions and customs and history that we've known and that we're proud of. And with Columbus and Columbus Day and a number of things that are happening, there's been a lot of activity. And this past week was especially active. What we saw happening, first and foremost, was the University of Notre Dame. The University of Notre Dame is quite possibly the most famous of Catholic institutions of higher learning located in South Bend, Indiana. And there, this past week, the student senate, the student body, voted to allow pornography to be shown on the Wi-Fi network of the university. So students in their dorm rooms with their laptop computers, their desktop computers, smartphone devices, whatever, can view pornography through the Wi-Fi system. And why this raises serious questions is because in 2020, right before the onset of COVID-19, the university president, Father John Jenkins, after consultation with faculty members and others, decided to censor the view of the Christopher Columbus murals in the main hall of Notre Dame. Luigi Gregori, back in 1880, was commissioned to paint, before and after the whole excursion of Columbus to and from the New World. And these murals were there on display in the main building. No one really had a problem with it until right before the pandemic. And he decided what he wanted to do, President Jenkins, Father Jenkins, he wanted to remove them. But then what he decided to do, I think it was difficult to remove them from from where they were located. He decided to just cover them. As the words that he or someone in the faculty had used, tapestries were going to cover the paintings, but really these are sheets. One of the paintings depicts Columbus landfall, and there is a cross behind him, and it's San Salvador. It's an expression of salvation that he makes to God. Well, this is covered. You can't see this. Apparently, this is considered insulting or offensive to people, but films depicting explicit scenes, gratuitous scenes, of sex and violence are not. Pornography is allowed, but Columbus is not allowed. And this, of course, raises the absurdity of it all. You can easily assess it all as the world turned upside down. This is a Catholic institution. Christopher Columbus is seen as introducing Christianity to the New World, and yet he is persona non grata. But pornographic cinema is acceptable. So this is what's happening there in Notre Dame. This is in the Midwest, of course, and in the Midwest, we've also had some news coming out of Chicago, America's third biggest city. Mayor Lori Lightfoot, who was praised when she was elected mayor of Chicago as the first openly gay woman, first Black woman elected mayor of Chicago. This was a history-making event. Well, it turns out she's made history the second time. For the first time in 40 years, a sitting mayor of Chicago did not win re-election. February 28th, an election was held in Chicago, and Mayor Lightfoot came in third place with only about 87,000 votes. She fell behind Paul Vallas, who was another Democratic candidate. He was the former CEO of Chicago Public Schools. He generated about 170,000 votes. And then there was Brandon Johnson, a member of the city council there. He generated about 104,000 votes. And those two will have a runoff in April. But for Mayor Lightfoot, her career has come to an end, at least in the foreseeable future, as mayor of Chicago. Now, Mayor Lightfoot paid a serious price politically when she alienated the Italian American community there in Chicago. If you can go back to 2020, on before July 20th, just about that period, there was a number of riots that had overtaken the Windy City there. This has happened right after the tragic death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. And there's riots all over the place. We had riots here in Washington, D.C., of course. You had them in New York, of course, Minneapolis, a number of other cities. But then Chicago, it came to Chicago's way. And she had promised the Italian American community that statue, that monuments of Christopher Columbus, located in Grant Park, located in the Little Italy section of Arrigo Park. And there's another statue at Drake Fountain there in the city, that those would not be removed, that they were going to be kept in place, that she wasn't going to cave into the Antifa Black Lives Matter mob. Well, what happened on July 19th was they all showed up after several days of riots and vandalism throughout the city. They showed up in her neighborhood in Chicago's West Side, and there they were, shouting, screaming. They were unruly. They looked like they were about to have some sort of riot there. And then midnight, July 20th, she had caved into the mob. She did order, I should say, the removal of the statue at Grant Park and the removal of the statue at Arrigo Park. And these were immediately removed in the dead of the night. And then the statue at Drake Fountain was eventually removed also. This had happened right after she had promised the Italian American community that those statues would stay there. Well, the next day or the day after, I forget, the Italian American community held a press conference, and they said that she was going to pay a political price, and lo and behold, she did. Now, some people are claiming that it wasn't the statue alone, and of course they're right about this. It wasn't her removal of the statue that probably led her to lose re-election, but I do believe it was a big part to play because she alienated a constituency of about 500,000 people there in Chicago, and she needed all the help she could get. And 25, 30,000 votes could have seriously helped her in her re-election bid. They would have taken votes away from the front runners and given it to her. But she didn't have those votes because the Italian American community didn't vote for her. They voted for the other candidates because of what she did and removal of the statues. This is a message to all the mayors out there and all the political leaders out there. You know, your political future is a dubious one. Is threatened when you go against the Italian American community and you tear down statues of Columbus and other figures. This is not a popular thing to do. You're just appeasing a small minority of people that live and breathe political correctness in the woke culture. And it's best not to cave into the mob, not to cave into these unruly discontents who threaten rioting or vandalism. fact, what you should probably do is enforce the law. And so, also, what happened this last week is another mayor of a city, is actually going to do that. He is going to enforce the law, and that's Mayor Eric Adams of New York City. Now, there in Central Park is a statue of Columbus that was designed and sculpted by a Spanish American sculptor, Geronimo Sonol. And this statue there, it's a very nice statue there in Central Park, was terribly vandalized at the end of February or beginning of March. Spray painted, obviously, a number of things were said. And the Columbus Heritage Coalition is headed by Angelo Vivolo, spoke out against this act of vandalism. And Eric Adams, the mayor of New York, to his credit, promised Mr. Vivolo that they will do all they can to find the perpetrators and bring them to justice. And this is welcomed. Mr. Vivolo of the Columbus Heritage Coalition has done a lot there to try to save the monument there in Columbus Circle in the middle of Manhattan. But also the monument, the Columbus Monument in Brooklyn, in front of Borough Park, in front of the City Hall there. That was erected by Emma Stebbins, and she was a sculptor, and there was a movement in Brooklyn to take that statue down. But then when it was brought to light that she had been a lesbian, an open person who lived with another woman, we brought that fact to our adversaries. All of a sudden that died down. That movement stopped, and now that statue is still kept in its place where it should be. And this is something that people need to understand. When you tear down a statue of Columbus, you're not just tearing down the historical figure, but you're tearing down the historical sculptor. Someone there has built that statue. They're not always Italians, and they're not always people of a British background, what have you. Quite often, they're people also who are Spanish. In the case of the statue in Central Park, or Emma Stebbins, a woman, female sculptor, one of the first here in the United States. You're destroying their works of art. You're destroying their contributions and the people they represent. And so this is wrong also. And this is why we're fighting this. This is why the art community needs to help us in this, help the Italian-American community fight this movement, which is based on misinformation, which is wrong in all capacities. Many of the statues that have been torn down, what's left are empty pedestals. And this is no good either. And so this is why we have to keep at it. Back in 2020, there were a number of statues that were torn down. And one of which was in Richmond, Virginia. Now, in Richmond, Virginia, what they've done is, in recent weeks, they have given the statue that was there in the park, that was in Bird Park, they've given it over to the Italian Cultural Alliance, and they're going to preserve the statue. Now, here's what happened there. This was back in 2020. Again, right after George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis. This statue that was there in Bird Park as a brown statue of Columbus was grossly vandalized, defaced, and then it was tipped over, and the statue was taken and thrown into a gully, into a gully there in the park. It's a very sad and awful thing that happened. Now, here's what's interesting about it: is that statue in Richmond, Virginia, was put in place by the Italian-American community in Richmond back in 1925. It was a barber by the name of Frank Realmuto. And Mr. Realmuto and others had done what you're supposed to when you erect a statue. People think that the government pays for it, but that's not the case. What it is, it's a group of people that will come together. They will collect the funds. They will buy the material. They will put together the design. They will hire the sculptor. They'll work out all of the conditions, and then they will donate it to the city or whoever. And it's that time when the city will set aside a piece of land to show the statue of the monument. Now, the Italian-American community is made up of barbers, workers, carpenters, bricklayers. This was a thank you note. This was a thank you note to the city of Richmond, thanking them and our country for the opportunity that they were given to leave very poor circumstances and to come to the United States and find the American dream. And they had done all that they could. They sculpted they had the sculpture, they had the material, and now the time came to work out the donation, where to put the statue up in this park. They wanted to put it in Monument Park in Richmond, Virginia, where there were a number of Confederate statues and other statues of important people that were there. Well, the city council back then denied the placement of the statue. And they denied the placement of the statue there in Monument Park because Columbus was a foreigner. Columbus was Roman Catholic. And it was based upon the expressions of a coalition that had protested the erection of the statue. Now, who was the coalition? The coalition was the Ku Klux Klan. They were members of the Ku Klux Klan headed this coalition. And so after word got out around the country, editorials began to appear indicating that Richmond was wrong to do this. So the city worked out a compromise. And basically that statue could be erected, statue of Christopher Columbus by the Italian-American community there in Richmond, Virginia, could be erected in Byrd Park. Well, it was there in 2020 where young people mostly, we assume that they were members of Antifa or Black Lives Matter, what have you, vandalized the statue, knocked it down, threw it in the gully. And what were they doing? They were fulfilling the goals of their major adversaries, the Ku Klux Klan. They did the bidding of the KKK when they tore down that statue. And this is particularly insulting to everything our country stands for, and particularly those people who actually went ahead and vandalized the statues. Now, you would think when information like this is brought forward that the mayor of the city, LeVar Stoney, would seek to enforce the law, seek to arrest the perpetrators, and put that statue back where it belongs. But no, he did the opposite. He supports the idea of tearing down that statue. Columbus is the bad guy of history based upon the misreporting of Howard Zinn. And so now what we're left with is this statue is handed over to the Italian Cultural Alliance there in Richmond, Virginia. Now, my hope is this. My hope is that the people down there, the Italian-American community down there, clean up the statue, fix it, and do everything you can to put that statue back where it belongs, put it back in Byrd Park, and make sure that everybody knows it was wrong to begin with, to tear down that statue, because this is what the KKK wanted to do, because this was prejudice against Catholicism and the fact that Columbus was a foreigner. And this is something that we don't accept. And so this has to be the message that we put forward. And these are some of the battles we're fighting right now in the community. And it's not just Columbus. Columbus is representative of the assault on public parks, public statues, because many of them represent the American history that we know and love. That's really to be erased, so that the United States becomes a different kind of country, a country without borders, a country that really doesn't even exist, so to speak. And we're seeing this happening in a lot of places. We're seeing this happening here in Washington, D.C., in the District of Columbia. That's not just about Columbus. McPherson Square Park is a park right off K Street in Washington, D.C. And this park has a statue by Luis Rubiso, an Italian sculptor who created a statue back in 1870 of General James McPherson. And there in McPherson Square, it's named after him. He's on a horse, obviously. And this park is located in the middle of an urban area of heavy traffic and buildings. And it's there for people to come and sit and see the shrubbery, the grass, the trees, and a natural oasis away from the steel and concrete of the city. Well, over the last 3 years, that has been encamped by a large homeless population. Now, these are tents that are put up there, and they cover the entire area. You see this happening in all kinds of cities. This happened right after the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have homeless shelters here in Washington, D.C. Apparently, they're unsafe. And so instead of moving the homeless to homeless shelters, they just encamped all over the place. And it's McPherson Square, where many of them were located at. Now, McPherson Square Park was the setting for Occupy DC back in 2011, 2012. Remember Occupy Wall Street? And this is how it happens. There's some big event that occurs, and then everything kind of continues after that. And so this event was a group of kids took over this park, and one of the first things they did was put a canvas over the statue. And there was even talk of tearing it down because some thought among the group of discontents that McPherson was a Confederate general. He wasn't a Confederate general, he was a Union general who died in battle. And they had encamped there for almost a year, and then they were moved out by the park authorities. But after that happened, on and off, you would see people encamped there, taking over the place. And then you had a homeless population that moved in to take over the entire park. You couldn't walk in the park, you couldn't do anything. A lot of tents, a number of trash, other things that have been kept all over the park. Well, the park police, National Park Service, was part of the Department of Interior, not part of the local law enforcement. They came in and cleaned out the park. Finally, they evicted everyone. So now that park is free of any squatters or any homeless encampments, and there's a fence now placed around the park. So this is what we're up against: is the idea of a public park. You know, the public park isn't meant for a homeless encampment. It's meant for people to walk through there, to sit on the park benches, to enjoy the oasis in the middle of the city. Now, this happened right after Kevin McCarthy became Speaker of the House of Representatives. Now, he represents the District of Bakersfield. Now, he replaced Nancy Pelosi, who was the first Italian-American to head the House of Representatives, to be Speaker of that chamber. Now, she's, of course, Italian. She represents a district in San Francisco. But Kevin McCarthy's maternal grandfather, he was an Italian immigrant also. Now, he's Republican, Nancy Pelosi was Democrat. Now, he is now the Speaker of the House. And since he's been here, he's made a lot of serious changes for the better, in my opinion. One thing that he's done is we have a problem going on right now in the District of Columbia of rapidly increasing crime. It's extraordinary. Again, this happened right after the riots. It's reminiscent of what happened in 1968 when Martin Luther King was assassinated. There was a big riot that occurred, and from that point onward, you began to see crime increasing all over the place. And Washington D.C. was once referred to as the murder capital of the world because from 1997 from 1998 to 1997, we had over 300 murders a year. At one point in time, we almost had 500 murders in 1 year's time. But after that period of time, you began to see a decrease. And around 2012 or 2013, I forget which, we had only 80 homicides. So there's a serious reduction in murders, in crime, robberies, burglaries, armed assault, you name it. Well, now it's going back up again. And so this is March 2023, and we already have 88 murders, according to the website that records the crimes, DC Witness. We have 88 murders currently, and that number, if we keep this pace up, we're easily going to get above 300 homicides for the year, and this would be particularly tragic. We're going to go back to the days of being known as the murder capital of the world. Well, you would think that out of all this happening, that the mayor and the city council would want us to focus on keeping our streets safe. You would think that they want to have more police presence, but no. What they want to do instead is they want to revise the criminal code. Now, apparently hearings were held and people could visit and make their own opinions about it over the years. I didn't know much about this at all, really. None of this was really, this wasn't reported in the news as much as it probably should have been. But who would have thought that in this time frame of increased crime and criminality that you'd want to revise the criminal code? And part of the revision is to make it um, um, crimes, misdemeanors, soft felonies, whatever, that they wouldn't have to stay in jail that long on parole, that they would be quickly released from prison. This is what's happened in New York, of course, and the devastating effect. And they want to do the same thing here. Well, Kevin McCarthy, to his credit, opposes this. The District of Columbia, at the end of the day, has to do what the Congress will allow it to do. And he has opposed this. It's different than states and cities that have self-determination or self-governance. The District of Columbia, because of its founding as a district, has to answer to Congress. And to his credit, McCarthy is saying, no, we're not going to allow you to revise the criminal code. We're going to keep the criminal code as it is. And instead, we're going to focus on the greater police presence and trying to enforce the law. At least that's what he's said rhetorically. But he is resisting the criminal code, and the Senate looks like they're going to do the same thing. And President Biden, to his credit, is going to sign off on it. So we're pushing back in this area, at least, of crime and soft on crime and appeasing the criminals. It's been quite bad here in the District of Columbia. We've had one young man, a high school age kid, kill another in the library. Recently, we've had other horrendous events. Ward 8 is really where many of the murders are occurring. It's very tragic. But this is just part of the situation here. Here in the District of Columbia, also what they want to do is they want to allow non-citizens the right to vote, and McCarthy's resisting that as well. Where I come from, you're supposed to be a citizen of the country in order to vote, but apparently they don't want to have that happen. They're trying to allow here in the District of Columbia, by the way, immigrants or foreigners. It's not so much people from south of the border, from people from Mexico and elsewhere. You'll find them more in the suburbs, Arlington and Fairfax. Here you have a lot of foreigners who are from Europe, Asia, parts of South America. They're coming here for college. They're working here at the various government entities, the World Bank, for instance. Might be college professors, what have you. And so, they want to be given the right to vote, although they're not citizens of the United States, what boggles the mind. And so McCarthy is resisting that. So far, I got to give credit to Speaker McCarthy, Italian American, the second to head that chamber. So far, he's doing a pretty good job, in my opinion. And we'll see how it turns out. And this is the way it's been going in this city. The war in Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine, is the big news. You see the Ukrainian flags all over the place. A lot of people are still supportive of this. That's the big news, I think, of this, the war in Ukraine, what the United States is going to do about that. And you have the West versus Russia, what's going on in Ukraine. And, as this war wears down and as this continues and we see the casualties increasing on both sides of Russia and Ukraine, the only one really, a major figure in the news who's stepping up to saying, we got to end this war, we got to settle it, is the former Prime Minister of Italy, Silvio Berlusconi. Silvio Berlusconi is back in the news because of his support for the first female prime minister of Italy, which is Giorgia Meloni. But she's with the Brothers of Italy political party, and Berlusconi, of course, with Forza Italia. And because he's this queen maker, he's in the news. He's a member of parliament, and he's been working hard for his political party. But he's come out and said that this war needs to end. That this has been bad for Russia, Ukraine. It's been bad for Eastern Europe. It's been bad for Italy. Italy had some very productive agreements with Russia. Russia would supply them with commodities, and they would turn those commodities into what Italy does best, into manufactured products and other types of things. Italy does not have any oil, really, to speak of, and other types of raw materials, but they get that from Russia and turn it into products for their economy. And this is what Berlusconi had structured in treaties and alliances with Russia. But Italy is a member of the European Union. Italy is a member of NATO, so it doesn't have much of a speaking voice. So we'll see what happens. But Italy has been at the forefront of trying to broker a settlement there in the war, and with Berlusconi stepping up, a major figure there in Italy, we'll see if this might change the mind of the members of the West. Doesn't seem to be doing that right now. It seems to be, everybody is well grounded to fight this to the end, but it could be very dangerous, as you well know. So this is what's happening throughout the country, throughout the world, and Italian Americans are very seriously involved in it. This is a very active and exciting time, I think, to cover this constituency and to find out what happens in the future. So, I hope to revisit with the latest news from an Italian American perspective. And if you have anything there that you want to bring to my attention, please do so. I want to help the Italian American community as much as possible. If you like this video, please like it, subscribe to it. We hope to have more videos in the future. A print magazine is coming away very soon as well. So a lot of things are happening. Wish you the best, and hope to hear from you very soon and to speak to you again very soon. And this is Truby Chiaviello, publisher and editor of PRIMO magazine. Thank you until we meet again.